Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cybersecurity Weekly. I'm your host, Fred Cobb, Executive Vice President and CISO at InfoSystems. And today we have Rob Ashcraft. Rob was on a couple previous episodes with me. Rob is Senior Cyber Strategist here at InfoSystems. Rob, great to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me on another episode.
Absolutely. So, Rob, for those of you that haven't heard any episodes where he's been on previously, Rob's a senior cyber strategist for InfoSystems, and he does a lot of work with our customers, everything from assessment work to getting involved in rapid response, incident recovery, cyber planning. He's a well-rounded individual, so it's great to have him on the show. Just a little bit of background. We have been covering a couple of different themes on Cybersecurity Weekly. One of those we're going to continue with today is our walk down the CSC20 Center for Internet Security Critical Security Controls path. And that path has 20 controls, or control families, if you will, that we have been investigating and talking about, and why it makes sense for organizations out there to follow the CSC framework. We managed to cover the first four, which hopefully you've tuned in, heard those. If not, please go back and listen to them. But we're going to talk about number 5 today, which is the secure configuration. Yes, number 5. So I get really excited about number 5 because it's something we see all the time that people can do a better job out in the workplace, out in their environments. But the control number 5 is the secure configuration of the hardware and software for workstations, for servers, for laptops, for even mobile devices. So Rob, I know you encounter this a lot when you're working with customers, but what are some of the things that you see out there when you're looking at devices and how insecure they might be?
Well, interestingly enough, this particular control, the configuration of the hardware and software on these devices is one of the most common gaps that we find that bad actors, hackers, are looking to exploit. And I think it's good to understand that hackers are generally looking for low-hanging fruit, and so bad configurations or incomplete, secure, non-secure configurations are low-hanging fruit. And so these system hardening is another, I guess, term for this, is very important. It's basically referring to the measures that are implemented on in the operating system when deploying computers, essentially to reduce unnecessary cyber vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I think I get asked this question from time to time. Let's say we're talking about your typical Office 365 deployment or your typical Windows Server operating system deployment. There are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of controls that you can go in, and term you used just a moment ago, harden the system, make it less vulnerable to exploitation. And people say, well, why isn't this more secure out of the box? Well, if you think about it, the vendor, they're whether or not this is right or wrong, some vendors do this, some don't, but they're thinking about ease of deployment, ease of use. How quickly can you get the operating system up and going? And just to tag onto that, the vendors, that take a Windows operating system. It could be deployed into any number of different environments with different types of required controls to make it more secure given that environment. So you really can't put the onus on the vendor, the manufacturer. In this case, we were just using Microsoft as an example. Can you? You really have to put that ownership back on the person that's doing the work to make it a more secure operating system deployment. Is that a fair statement?
No, I think that's very fair. I like how you touched on the idea of there's a difference between operational efficiency and secure configurations, and really the default needs to lean toward security first. And of course, things need to be efficient and need to work and operate together well, but not at the expense of leaving the system vulnerable. And so again, rigorous configuration management, change control process in this is going to prevent attackers from exploiting these services in the settings.
Yeah, and it's important to note too, and we'll start talking about STIGs and we'll talk about CIS benchmarks here in just a moment, but it's important to note too that even if you, let's say, deploy that operating system today and you go through a hardening exercise, over time, as the environment may change, as features may get added to the OS, as new vulnerabilities are discovered, you're going to get hardening decay. Kind of just think about what is good for the operating system today, a year, 18 months down the road, may not be as secure as this moment in time.
We'll be back with the Cybersecurity Weekly podcast after we pause for this special message. Security analysts believe cyber attacks will continue to escalate throughout 2020 and are recommending that every company, regardless of industry or size, place immediate focus on cybersecurity training and the tools that will protect you from these attacks. Did you know that you can book a cybersecurity assessment right now with Fred Cobb's team of cybersecurity engineers at InfoSystems? They will help you discover exactly where you are most vulnerable to a cyber attack and make recommendations on how to strengthen your defense in those areas. This is urgent. It's an issue that affects everyone in our community. Visit the InfoSystems website at www.infosystems.biz to request your cybersecurity assessment. Now back to the podcast.
So,
yeah, indeed. There's only 5 subcontrols in this control family, so it's a small family, but these are deep. And as you mentioned, first establishing those secure configurations in the first place, whether the system be a Windows, Linux, Mac, whatever particular software you're using, but then also maintaining. That's 5.2. The second subcontrol in there is maintaining those secure configurations across the enterprise, understanding what systems have what, and or what operating systems, and also any new system deployments or existing that maybe have become compromised. And so these are all very important parts and aspects of hardening your configurations.
Yeah, indeed. Cool thing is you're not out there, you're sitting there in front of this operating system. You don't have the luxury of maybe bringing in a cyber professional to do this for you, even though we'd highly recommend it because there's so many moving parts to more complex operating systems and other devices, whether it's a firewall, whether it's a managed switch, what have you. But there are some resources out there available to an individual. The CIS benchmarks, as an example. I think last count, if I'm not mistaken, Rob, there were over 140 published CIS benchmarks. And can you talk a little bit about what those are and how you might be able to use those?
Sure. So, the CIS itself is well-known. It's created by well-known IT security organizations, all working together in collaboration. The ISACA, ISC squared, AICPA, and et cetera, others. So there's, as you mentioned, there's hundreds of different reports available now. Those are free to get. You can look up CIS benchmarks online. I think you have to become a member to get into those, if I'm not mistaken, but it's a free membership. And they're going to cover everything from operating systems, different applications, network devices, i.e. Windows operating systems, Linux, Mac, Cisco network devices, and major internet browser applications, things like that. And these are really deep. I mean, some of these are hundreds of pages just for one particular operating system or device. And some of this can be automated too, which we can talk about in different tools, which are also mentioned in under the Control Family 5. But anyway, so that's all within the CIS benchmarks. And so, as you mentioned, there's a learning curve involved. There's a lot to learn. Sometimes it makes sense just to hire a security professional that's been there, done that, has studied these, stays up to date on them, to come in and just help establish your secure configuration. So you're using those, and you have either images or templates that you're using for that. But nonetheless, CIS benchmarks is another. You also mentioned DISA-STIG, so we might want to jump on that one.
Yeah, certainly. So STIG stands for Secure Technical Information Guide. And there are unclassified STIGs that you can go out. In fact, there's a website if you just go to, and I think I've got it jotted down here. Yeah, actually, stigviewer.org. You can go to stigviewer.org and all of the unclassified DISA STIGs. And it's actually more heavily populated, if you can believe it, than the CIS benchmark information from cisecurity.org. So if you think about, I've got a specific Cisco ASA firewall as an example. There's a DISA STIG wrote on how to deploy that in a highly secure manner. So, and how to deploy SQL Server, pick a flavor. So the list goes on and on and on. These STIGs have been written again to install either the device or the application or the operating system in an unclassified manner. Obviously, for classified information, you have to have proper security clearances to get access to that data. But certainly take a look at the DISA STIGs on the unclassified side, and it's a real eye opener for you. So.
Yeah, no doubt. So the part of the DoD and one of their agencies is the Defense Information Systems Agency, which is DISA. So if you hear us referencing that, that's what that stands for. And they have these basically sets of configurations or checklists that they create, send out, and all kinds of different things: minimize network-based attacks or prevent system access from attackers. And there's many of these are now unclassified and available. So they create and maintain these security standards for computer systems. Why not take advantage of them?
Right. And you touched on something just a moment ago, and as we're wrapping up this episode, I want to make sure we circle back around to it. You mentioned having images. It's a lot easier. Let's say you're going to deploy Windows 10 operating system into your environment, and say you've got 100 deployments you got to do. Isn't it a lot easier to build an image and harden that image, customize that image to your environment using either the DISA STIG or the CIS benchmark, or something custom that if you're savvy enough to come up with, create that hardened image, store that. That way you can roll it out over and over and over again. You're not missing a specific security control if you're deploying everything from a scratch install. So.
No, I would agree. If you're doing any large amounts of deployments like that, it makes sense all day long to have these in. Once you have established these baseline configurations and contrasted them against these, something like the CIS benchmarks or DISA STIGs, to maintain those, update them, keep them updated, securely store them, validate possibly with some type of integrity monitoring tool or something that nothing's been changed. Just doing due diligence to have the images and keep them updated and secured within your own environment. And then there's other things. For example, you can deploy system configuration management tools, again, which gets a little more in depth. But if you're doing a lot of deployments, these come in handy for keeping an eye on these. There's tools like Puppet or Ansible or Salt, some different ones that are checking, redeploying configuration settings on regularly scheduled intervals. There's also automated configuring monitoring tools. Again, we're getting a little deeper into it, but right. Depending on the size of the environment, a lot of times these make sense to have. There's a SCAP compliant configuration monitoring system. I don't mean to go too deep on it, but I'm just thinking of a couple things that the rabbit trail goes on. From the beginning, though, regardless of what sized organization you are, we implore companies that we work with to have these established secure configurations, even if you're just using templates and putting them out, and to maintain those. Those are the two most important parts.
Absolutely. Rob, I think we're going to wrap it up for today. We've covered a lot of good material, and it's important for us to talk about these various controls. Again, we're focusing on the Center for Internet Security, critical security controls. And this one is particularly important. I mean, they all are, but and we'll be covering 6 through 20 as we go through episodes in the future. Again, thank you for joining us today. We're going to continue also, for those of you regularly tuning in, with our talks about various cybersecurity roles. What can, when you're wanting to have a career in cybersecurity, what does that mean? All the different things you can explore within that realm of a cybersecurity professional. So I think our very next episode is talking about being a cyber defender. So those of you that are listening, we encourage you to tune in to that, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks.